John loved unique, strange artifacts. He browsed online auctions, drawn to the unusual. One night he found it, a wooden mask, ancient, grotesque. The description was brief, the mask that sees. John had to have it. A week later, it arrived. The mask was more unsettling in person. Carved from dark wood, it depicted a face contorted in a silent scream. The eyes were empty sockets, but John felt a chill as if something watched him through them. He tried to rationalize his discomfort. It was old, probably used in rituals. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the mask held something more, something sinister, waiting to be unleashed. The mask arrived in a plain, unmarked box, its simplicity belying the mystery it held within. John carefully opened it, his heart pounding with anticipation and a strange sense of dread. He had been waiting for this moment, yet, now that it was here, he felt a chill run down his spine. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was the mask. It looked ancient, as if it had seen countless years and held untold stories. The wood was darker than he imagined, almost black, and it felt strangely cold beneath his fingers. It was as if the mask had absorbed the essence of the ages it had witnessed. As John lifted the mask, a wave of unease washed over him. The air seemed to grow heavier, and he could almost hear a whisper, too faint to understand. It felt heavier than it should, and the empty sockets seemed to bore into him, observing his every move. The mask's gaze was unrelenting, as if it was judging him. He hung it on his wall, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of his neck. The room seemed to darken, shadows lengthening as the mask took its place. John told himself it was just an old mask, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had invited something into his home. Why did he feel so uneasy? Was it the mask itself, or was his imagination running wild? The questions gnawed at him, leaving him restless and on edge, as if the mask was silently watching, waiting. The first few days were normal. The mask hung on John's wall, a grotesque ornament, yet he found himself drawn to it. He would catch himself staring at it, feeling a strange pull, an unsettling fascination. Then things started to change. John felt a presence in his apartment, a heaviness in the air, especially when he was near the mask. He began to hear whispers, when alone, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to emanate from the mask's direction. Sleep offered no escape. John's dreams were plagued by shadowy figures, their faces obscured by darkness, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart racing, the feeling of being watched clinging to him like a shroud. The nightmares worsened. They were vivid, terrifying, centered around the mask. He'd see it up close, its empty sockets glowing, whispering his name in a raspy voice. John woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. He felt watched, even during the day. He started seeing shadows move in the corner of his eye, fleeting glimpses of something sinister lurking just beyond his vision. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. John was trapped in a waking nightmare, haunted by the mask and the growing terror that it brought with it. Section 5. The Eyes. One evening, as John sat reading, a glint of light on the mask caught his eye. The room was dimly lit, and the mask had always been just a decoration, a relic from a forgotten time. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. The mask had never done anything like this before. The light was coming from the mask's eye sockets, a faint, eerie glow that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. It was as if the mask had come to life, its eyes now windows to another world. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding against his ribs. Each step felt like an eternity, the glow growing stronger with every inch he closed. As he drew closer, the glow intensified, revealing something within the sockets. It was not just light, it was as if the mask was trying to communicate, to show him something. 2 points of light, like tiny embers, seemed to burn from within, staring back at him with an unnerving intensity. They were not just lights, they felt like eyes, watching him, judging him. John stumbled back, a wave of dizziness washing over him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. When he looked back, the light was gone, and the sockets were empty once more. Had he imagined it? Was it a trick of the light, or something more sinister? Or was the mask revealing its true nature, piece by terrifying piece? The questions lingered in his mind, haunting him long after the glow had faded. Section 6. Watching. Fear became John's constant companion. He couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, scrutinized by unseen eyes. He tried to remove the mask to get rid of it, but something held him back. He found himself drawn to it, compelled to look at it, to feel the weight of its gaze upon him. It was as if the mask had a hold on him, whispering dark secrets into his mind, feeding his paranoia, and twisting his perception of reality. The shadows in his apartment seemed to deepen, to writhe and undulate at the edges of his vision. He felt a constant presence lurking just beyond his sight, a sense of something malevolent watching him from the darkness. Section 7. The darkness moves. One night, John woke with a start. Something was different. The room was darker than usual, and the shadows seemed to be alive. They danced on the walls, swirling and twisting with an unnatural energy. Then he saw it. A figure, tall and skeletal, emerged from the shadows in the corner of his room. Its eyes glowed with the same eerie light he had seen in the mask's sockets, burning into him like hot coals. John was paralyzed with fear, unable to scream, unable to move as the figure glided towards him, its skeletal hands reaching out, its glowing eyes reflecting an ancient, unfathomable evil. Section 8. Hallucinations. John tried to convince himself it was a hallucination, a trick of his sleep-deprived mind, but deep down he knew the truth. The mask wasn't just an object, it was a conduit, a gateway to something dark and sinister. He saw fleeting glimpses of the shadowy figures everywhere he went, lurking in doorways, peering at him from reflections, their glowing eyes a constant reminder of the nightmare he couldn't escape. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, whispering his name, taunting him, urging him to embrace the darkness that was closing in around him. His grip on reality was slipping, and he was powerless to stop it. Section 9. Trapped. John became a prisoner in his own home. The walls that once provided shelter now felt like a cage, closing in on him with every passing second. The outside world, once a source of comfort and connection, now seemed distant and unreal. The bustling streets and vibrant cityscape were now just a distant memory, shrouded in a fog of despair. The only reality was the darkness that surrounded him, the shadows that danced at the edge of his vision, and the terrifying certainty that he was no longer alone. The shadows seemed to whisper secrets, secrets that only deepened his fear and isolation. He tried to destroy the mask, to break its hold over him. He smashed objects in a desperate attempt to regain control, but each effort only left him more exhausted and defeated. But it was no use. The mask's grip was unyielding, its power over him absolute. Every attempt to fight back only tightened its hold. The mask seemed to mock his efforts, its grotesque features contorted in a silent sneer. It was as if it thrived on his despair, feeding off his fear and hopelessness. It was as if it knew his every thought, anticipated his every move, and held him captive in its web of fear. The paranoia grew, making him question every shadow, every sound. John was trapped, both physically and mentally, his life consumed by the nightmare that the mask had unleashed. The once clear distinction between his thoughts and the mask's influence was now a tangled mess. And with each passing moment, the line between reality and the supernatural world that the mask revealed was blurring, until he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. The confusion was overwhelming, leaving him in a perpetual state of dread and uncertainty. Section 10. The Mask Sees. The horrifying truth dawned on John. The mask didn't just show him the entities lurking in the shadows, it allowed them to see him, to interact with his world. He was visible to them, a puppet for them to torment. He was now living in their world, a world where fear and madness reigned supreme. His sanity shattered, John could only watch in terror as a clawed hand, reaching from the shadows behind the mask, slowly tightened its grip on his reality.